Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 5 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Beautiful day. So years ago, Robin, I did a radio show. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Still doing a radio show. But years ago, I did a radio show with a lady named Robin.
Yes.
Wait a minute. Well, that was you, wasn't it? That was you. And Robin worked for the, what was the film company?
The Florida Motion Picture and Television Association and the Film Commission of Real Florida.
Okay, so Robin was part of those two things, and I know you know that because that's you.
That's right.
But anyway, so this was a long time ago, and when I found out that Robin did these things, do we have another caller come in? No.
No.
Somebody's making a mistake. Oh, so anyway, so when I knew that you did these things, I said just kind of flippantly, I said, boy, I always wanted to be one of those extras that's like sitting in the cafe, nobody knows my name, and then a car comes crashing through the wall, and then I can go to the movie theater and say, look, there I am, boom, and that's it. You know, I didn't have any aspirations to be an actor, but I thought, wouldn't it be cool to be in one of those scenes? So what do? You invite some people into the theater that you knew, right? Next thing you know, I'm telling them this kind of a silly thing I wanted to do. And next thing you know, I'm in a movie and no car comes crashing through the screen. I have no lines. I am an extra,
yes, right?
And there's a scene in the movie where you can see me looking through the window at a monster, like sniffing underwear or something.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Okay.
Jeepers Creepers.
Now, I didn't see the monster sniffing underwear, but in the movie it looks like I am, right?
Right,
because
exactly.
you see my face opening up the Venetian blinds, right?
That's right.
So it was so cool. And for those of you who don't know, that was right here in Florida. Robin had this was part of a group that brought this movie here.
Pretty amazing.
It was amazing. And then what happened? Then the government decided to change some of the rules, right? A local state government? Okay.
Yep, they did push production out of the state, push Grady Bishop and his guys' extreme stunts out of the state. And it was really pretty sad.
This is a subject you know so much about. We have somebody on the phone who also knows a lot about movie making. She is on the phone. She's Meredith Jordan. She's an award-winning reporter. She was an embedded journalist for an entire Hollywood feature. I think it's the one called Las Vegas, I think. And she's on the phone right now to talk to us about this. I'm a geek when it comes to this stuff. I want to know the behind-the-scenes stuff. Good morning, Meredith. How you doing?
I am good. Thanks for having me on.
Good. So can you get me in a movie? I want to be an extra in a movie. Can I do that? Where are you? Where are you calling from?
I am in Southern California.
Oh, you do? So that's a good place to be. That's always going to be a movie-making place, isn't it?
It is, but I lived in Florida a long time, went to college in Florida, and I'm coming back in March. So you have a great state there.
What school did you go to?
Eckerd College, St. Petersburg,
Eckerd.
Florida.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and like I was, I wasn't just hinting, I was coming out and saying it. Robin actually did a lot of work with the two film groups that she was with, and she's really good friends with a stuntman.
Grady Bishop.
Thank you.
From Extreme Stunts.
Yeah, so, we had kind of a thriving thing going on here for a while. Does the book talk about that kind of thing?
It does, absolutely. I mean, it's the reason Georgia is the center place piece for the book, because they're shooting there because of the tax credits. And it's so real, in fact, that the budget itself doesn't reflect the cost, which is $36 million for the movie. It reflects the ultimate final cost to the makers of $30 million.
And that's where Grady moved his stunt guys.
Oh, really?
Yeah, up there. Yep, they shut down their extreme stunts at Disney World, and then they moved up there, and they're getting a lot of work.
Really?
Yeah.
So
and North Carolina people did that too. When North Carolina shut its program down, they all moved to Georgia.
Oh, they had a similar problem. So why? I mean, is the Las Vegas a movie that's being made right now?
No, it was out 2013, and then still, I think, on cable in 2015.
Oh, okay.
It took longer to do the research for the book, to really study this kind of thing, as well as to go to all the prop houses and costume houses and really see all aspects of film.
So, but it was made in Georgia.
Georgia and Las Vegas.
Oh, okay. So the book, the synopsis of the book tells me that this is not about the stars as much as it is about the behind the scenes people. Is that where a lot of the cost saving comes from? If a movie production company goes to a state that is movie making friendly, is it because of all those other people?
Yeah, it provides all the jobs and then all the money they spend. A movie production is like very different than any other financial business, and that it comes in with all that money and then it begins to spend. So they're basically spending their budget until there's zero or close to it, and that is the goal of a producer, is to not exceed the budget but to get pretty close to it. And that's what they do. They just spend money.
And this is probably an amateur question to you in Robin's ears, but does the same thing apply to TV shows as it does to movies?
Yes. Tax exempts can vary by state, but they all include, as far as I know, both features and television.
And what's wonderful about production companies, like you mentioned earlier, they do use local talent. I mean, they need caterers, they need hairdressers, they need people that have the period cars for their production, and that is all done locally.
It really is. And Georgia, because it's stuck with it, has built up a major presence, like a foundational level, on par, I would say it's on par with LA, but very impressive. And Cannabis opened offices in Georgia, and I think they were in Florida for a while and have left. So they kind of go where the business is.
So when a decision is made in the state capitol that affects the movie business in the way that it did here, and it sounds like in North Carolina, did our legislators, what's the cliche, cut off their nose to spite their faces? In other words, did we actually lose money in an attempt to save money?
Well, what they did was let it sunset, right? So I think it had gone in place in Florida in 2010, and then it was by statute going to sunset in 2016, and they just chose not to act. So it was a little easier politically because they didn't have to answer questions about, why they took it out, which they did in North Carolina, or at least more. So that's kind of how that played out in Florida. But it has absolutely led to a decline in production there.
I had heard that, and this is, again, probably sounds like an amateur question, but I had heard that movies was America's biggest export. Is that true?
I would guess it's high up there, but I don't know that for sure. I think so, though.
I'm sure a movie made in Hollywood, where you are, that really knocks it out of the ballpark, brings in maybe billions of dollars. I don't know.
Well, California was late to the game. They did not want to give tax incentives.
Really?
And they finally did it, yeah, because they were, when it began to, when it was apparent, in fact, probably late to the game, like I said. But now they're back, they're doing it. They offer 25% to Georgia's 30%. But see, Florida and other states wouldn't have to match that. A lot of people are matching the 30%, but if Florida just did something, that would make a big difference. And
when John Travolta filmed The Punisher, it was all filmed down in St. Petersburg and Tampa. And that brought a lot of local jobs to people also.
I didn't know that. Really?
Yep.
Well, Bloodline, shot in the Keys, right? That was a really expensive television production. Mm-hmm. And, that's big money, and that's really well documented. A lot of these, that you can see what it's bringing in. And then I think with the other side is saying, well, we're not getting our money back. But 0% is zero. So these are not companies that would have come anyway. Mm-hmm. And so they come in and they spend the money, and what they make it back in the taxes for the people who work on the shows. You guys don't have income tax, do you?
No, not the state income tax.
We have to pay it. We just don't have it.
What also is nice about film companies is when they come in and they send their scouts for the different sites that they need to have for their locations and shore up whatever it is that they need. If they're going to have like a battle scene or something explode, when the film companies leave, they restore the area to the way it was when they first saw it, at no expense to the homeowner or the owner of the land or the city or the taxpayers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the contract, too. And then they lease people's houses for locations or storefronts. The hotel rooms, I think, in Florida in particular, is a huge, portion of it. But, yeah, they hire all kinds of – the paper, just the paper they're buying, the paper shredding companies. It creates all kinds of business opportunities for people as well.
Exactly, and people wouldn't think that paper shredding companies would be involved in this, but they are.
Yeah, it has really long, as I say, a really long reach to a lot of different elements to it. But there were some stats that, provided by Florida's, people. They were saying that Florida lost more than $1 billion over the past 3 years since it cut it out. And that's, 160,000 hotel room nights. And
that's always big, yeah.
I think it's just greed among the politicians, because I think the politicians are looking for some kind of money in their own personal pockets, and they sort of want to take care of themselves before they want to take care of the people that live here.
Yeah, there is some of that. What happened, it's really interesting to watch West Virginia right now, because West Virginia, removed it in its entirety. Not even keeping a small portion of the budget. They just sort of killed out the whole thing. And but somebody got elected to the state legislature who's a CPA. And so what she's been able to do is kind of explain the fundamentals of it, to say, look, zero, like I said earlier, 0% of, 30% of zero is zero. If they're there, they're at least spending the money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's happened, and now they're getting some traction. At least got to the floor in West Virginia, and I'm not sure where it goes from here, but it's something.
And I know when Jeepers Creepers were what was filmed here, some of the cast and including the director and producer and his family stayed in the Villages, which was like about 30 miles from here in Ocala, and the Villages rented out bungalows to them, and that brought in a lot of revenue.
Absolutely. And it also, there's intangibles that, when you see Florida in a movie, like Magic Mike, right? I think that was shot in Tampa. That people see that, and they can't even quantify how many people come there, except to compare one year to the next.
Yeah. I was thinking about, there was a little town in Georgia that they did the Green Tomatoes movie in, and there was a story not that long ago, really, about that little restaurant still gets people showing up just because of that movie.
Oh, it's huge. Like Dolphin Tale was done also in Florida, and some of the people who worked on Las Vegas had done Dolphin Tale. They had the aquarium, I think, had 75,000 visitors before and 750,000 after.
Oh, wow. See,
yeah.
And I know we just have this curiosity about those kind of things. I mean, even in the theme parks, I don't know if Universal still does this, but they have a backstage tour, and it's not really where anything was filmed. They just recreate whatever was done out where you are. But still, it's fun to see. This is the house that the Golden Girls was made in, or that kind of thing. I don't know why it's fun. It just is. It's part of our culture, I guess.
Exactly.
It is, and it really is interesting to see how they do it. There's so many people that work in production that are really unknown. That it's the golfer and that kind of thing that people say, what does the person do?
Yeah.
And that's what my book does. I interview a lot of people and just hear how they got into the business, and you see them doing their jobs, and then I kind of explain, how the cameraman, began in college and whatever it might be.
So I'm not being fair to the book. Because you just reminded me, this is about the book. The book is called Below the Line, Anatomy of a Successful Movie. So in the book, you speak to the people who are working the cameras and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I was embedded. I had a desk inside the production office, and I could go anywhere I wanted, which is very unusual. And, one by one, I talked to crew, almost all, not all, but the 95% of them. And I watched the actors. I mean, it was De Niro and Douglas and Freeman and Klein. So I saw them as they're working, but they weren't I wasn't trying to interview them and make it about them. I wanted to learn what the production designer was doing, for instance. So it's belowthelinebook.com.
What was it called?
Belowthelinebook.com.
Belowthelinebook.com. We work in radio, and so I guess this is a little bit fascinating to some people too. And every once in a while, somebody will call up and say, "Hey, can we take a tour of the radio station?" "Oh, sure, come on in." And I had no idea that there was that same kind of a vibe happening around me that is happening. So we're kind of at the
right.
If there's a totem pole of showbiz, we're at the bottom, whatever that means, right?
Oh, it's fascinating what you guys do. I mean, remember WKRP in Cincinnati?
Oh, yeah. That was fun.
Yeah, but that was
fun.
TV show. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we do.
Okay, so in the movie, the Las Vegas, I just looked it up real quickly. Most of it is filmed in Atlanta, it says.
Well, a month in location, and then, shot in Atlanta. And Atlanta, it was cheaper to rebuild a penthouse. This was a 9,000-foot set, 2 stories, built to the specs of the penthouse at the Aria.
Wow.
Las Vegas. It was cheaper to do it that way. And then they shot, the location stuff there, which was about a little less than a month in Las Vegas, which was fascinating. And then back to Georgia, where they had, in the meantime, recreated the sets. And it was just an amazing process.
So, did you say 9,000 feet tall?
9,000 square feet.
Oh, 9,000 square feet. Okay.
No, but I'll tell you what, they did go up in the air. They got Michael Douglas and Mary Steenburgen to get on a ride and go off, it's called the X-Scream, and go off the
oh, really?
stratosphere. And they did their own stunts, so that was sort of an
I have a crush on Mary Steenburgen. Can you tell her that? Do you know, she did a film here.
Yes.
She did a role where she depicted an author named, don't tell me, Marjorie... Oh gosh, Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings.
Yes,
was that right?
Yes.
And Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings had a home in our community when she was here, when she was alive, and Mary Steenburgen played her role. And so after that movie, guess what? We all went up to that little historic house, and we still go there to this day. People still go there because of that movie.
Yeah, that's they can't even, you can't quantify how bad, except when you see the increase in the number of visitors, but it is huge. And Mary was lovely. The thing about having a reporter, they don't know I'm there. And so, what you're seeing in the book is how they really are. So, they weren't all
really,
but they're all professionals.
So when you were there, how did they manage to say yes to have you there for the entire production?
Well, a particular producer let me in, and I wasn't clear who knew what, and I think some are not happy about it, to tell you the truth. So,
oh, no.
The unit production manager, so there is some controversy, but I will say this. I mean, this is why there's no other books like this. None. The only books that are even remotely about inside movie production are people that shadow the director. So nobody's done this. And to me, this is the story that was missing. But the good news is that, if I'd found it, if it was a debacle, then this book would be about a movie debacle, which is all the others had been. But it isn't. This thing was very well done, both on the business side and the director, John Turteltaub. He did The Meg, that shark movie this summer.
Oh, yeah. My daughter loves that movie.
Yeah, so John knew I was a journalist, but I wasn't following the others, so there wasn't sort of obligation for me to be out there. But all of this crew knew, so I don't know if it was a secret, but part of the culture is that you keep your mouth shut anyway. So there you go.
As a journalist, you have deadlines, and one thing I've often wondered about movies is their deadlines. It's almost like they have it all mapped out, so they know exactly what scene they'll be doing, a month and a half from today. It's always amazing to me that they know how the progress will go.
Right. All business to take a real lesson from Hollywood in this regard. And so that's called the shooting schedule. And the first assistant director, they come in during prep and they began building the schedule because they have to put in what actors are available when. So they commit to do it, but they also will have blackout dates. And absolutely, they had a date when they needed to shoot a cameo appearance, and they had Kanye West was in, and I assume he had the role, but there was a scheduling conflict. He simply couldn't do it that day, and they couldn't change it.
Really?
So then and then it was a big part, right, where a famous rap star comes into the party the guys are throwing, the retirement guys. Okay. and so but it ended up with 50 Cent. Curtis Jackson did the role, and it was just an amazing process.
Did the acting bug ever bite you? Have you ever wanted to do that?
No, I've always been the observer type. I come from a family of journalists, so I like learning how things work.
That's a fun assignment.
Yeah, no, lucky. I felt so blessed. And they're amazing, I have to say, to watch De Niro and Douglas and all of them, Freeman, all of them. Amazing. That sounds
like a really fun. I know a lot of journalists who they went into journalism because they liked writing and they were looking forward to it, and then they get a job at a newspaper and they're sent to cover a traffic accident or a courtroom scene, with a murder. It's not exactly what they wanted to get into. Did you go through was that like paying your dues for you? Did you go through that?
Oh, yeah. I was a police reporter for 30 years. And it was, I don't to date myself, but back in the advent of crack cocaine, when we had all of those horrible homicides, I was a kid running around. And
oh, no. What city were you in? L.A.?
Gosh.
D.C.
Oh, in D.C.? Oh, my gosh. That's even worse.
The murder capital.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
What's really wonderful about working on a set, too, is that even if you're the smallest of the small extra, everybody respects the protocol on the set. And I think that's pretty amazing.
Oh, it is. The history, like you're talking about. I heard the primary camera operator refer to the director as sir. There's a real tradition that happens. It's just, it's really refreshing and remarkable, actually, in a lot of ways.
Oh, that is nice. Yeah. So the boss is that is nice. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have that respect.
I could see that. I remember the food. Remember when we did the extra stuff?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
We were there for 3 days. I mean, long 3 days too.
Yeah.
And then when you see the actual movie, there it is, gone. Here it is, gone. I said to Robert, we're going to be all over this movie. They're filming us forever. But then you see the movie, there it goes.
Yeah, right.
No, and so much goes into it, planning, and it's just it's a crazy thing. But yeah, but one of the producers said something to the effect of, "You can ask people to do a lot if you feed them well."
Well, that's true. I think funny. That's true.
All right, so I have a question to ask you because you're a writer, and especially since you've written a book. One of the things I often think about is how come some of these well-seasoned directors and actors sometimes come up with flops. Because you would think that the bottom line would be the story. So the book that starts the whole thing, that's usually the beginning of a movie, is a book, right? You would think that the book should tell them right away this is not going to work. But they still run with some of those that don't work anyway, don't they?
Well, there's so many other variables, it's timing, there's so many elements about it. But one thing that's really huge, and I go into this a little bit, not as much as I would like to have, about distribution. The budget for this movie was 1/3 just marketing and distribution. So they have to know they have placement in theaters. There's a lot that just is so shrouded about Hollywood, which is was part of my interest, is what's going on. How does it really work? And so that's the director's always held accountable for that, and yet sometimes it really isn't their fault, but generally they do have a lot of control, I have to say.
Did you witness them having to put up with fans? Like if they're at a place in Atlanta, I'm sure some people recognize them.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing. In Vegas, yeah, everybody knows De Niro, so I think of those three actors as kind of on the same level, but De Niro did have a little bit different status, so I saw, especially, people would be, that's De Niro, and they come around.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And sometimes you get to see the real person behind the personality that the actor is trying to exude at the moment. And sometimes people think actors are aloof, the more famous they are, but in reality it's just the opposite. They're very kind and caring.
Yeah, that's one of the very, very cool things about this, is that all of them were really good people and nice to the crew, and I didn't know what I would find, and I'd be telling you if it had been different. But they were. My theory on that is that these are icon status actors, and I don't think that the people you read the most about as being kind of crazy can sustain that status for this long.
Yeah.
So
right.
So part of it's just who they are, that they're still able to work at that level.
So we need to use interviews like yours and books like yours and experiences to approach our elected officials to say, hey, this is a good thing.
Yeah, I think the argument for doing some kind of taxing in Florida is that, without it, you're really, it's dropped off. They can see that part. But the other thing is that these are not businesses that would come anyway. So you're really just bringing people in to drop their money in the state. And so there's not a lot to lose. Whether you get 43% or back, it's 43%. You can have it all.
That's a really good point. Well, Meredith, you're a star in your own right. I mean, you've got credentials that are so impressive. Thank you for being on the air with us today. The book is called Below the Line. If you're interested in the an anatomy of a successful movie, this is a good book for you to check out. I found it on Amazon. Do you have a different website you want to recommend?
BelowTheLineBook.com will give more information about it. But yeah, the Amazon's the place.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. Meredith, thank you so much.
Thank you guys both. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Bye. We'll be right back.
Fox News, I'm Lillian Wu. The president's former personal attorney goes before the House Oversight Committee this morning.
Based on the 20 pages of prepared remarks on the question of Russian collusion, Michael Cohen will testify that he has suspicions but no direct evidence. Cohen says his suspicions are based on political operative Roger Stone and his interactions with WikiLeaks in the summer of 2016 over the hacked Clinton emails.
Fox's Catherine Herridge. Cohen expected to tell lawmakers Donald Trump knew in advance that WikiLeaks planned to release stolen emails damaging to his political rival, but counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, pushing back.